Howdy, folks. Mr. Reardon here. I'd like to walk you through 8 literary devices that you really need to know in order to get the most out of our reading of Romeo and Juliet, and in order to for you to be set up for success on the Romeo and Juliet reading quizzes we will be having this semester. So, jumping right in here, the first one you need to know is prose. So prose is just the word we use to refer to something that's written in sentences and paragraphs. Like one sentence flows into the next sentence. You only break a line when you have to because it's the end of the page and you have to start again on the next line. That's prose. Novels are written in prose. Short stories are written in prose. Most of the articles and things we read on a day-to-day basis are written in prose. So I have this example here of something that's written in prose. This is actually the first line of Mice and Men. So because of Mice and Men is a novella, it's all written in prose. Now this is different than poetry and plays, and I'm putting those together for a reason. A lot of plays are written in a poetic way, so those go together, and they're written differently than prose. So for poetry and plays, you might not have complete sentences, one that flows into the next. Now, in poetry and in plays, the text is written in lines and in groups of lines. We call a group of lines stanzas. So that's a word from Italian. In when we're talking about prose, we would say it's a paragraph. But when we're talking about poetry or a play, a little grouping of lines is called a stanza. So poetry and plays can have lines that stop and start whenever the writer wants to on a page. They don't just go on and on to the end of the page and then start again. They actually, they'll stop in a regular pattern in a lot of cases. So here's a good example. This is a teeny little poem that I just love called Harlem by Langston Hughes. And you can see how the writer, decided to just end the line and start a new one wherever he wanted in order to convey a certain kind of effect. What happens to a dream deferred? Does it dry up like a raisin in the sun, or fester like a sore and then run? Right. The ending of the lines is deliberate, unlike in prose where it would just all run together and be one long sentence. So also, poetry and plays can have a specific rhythm to the language, like a beat. We'll call this meter, and we're actually going to talk about that at the very end of this presentation. But what you should know is that prose generally doesn't have meter or rhythm, and that's like regular and that the author or creator puts there intentionally. But poetry and plays do. So be aware of that. So you need to know, right? Romeo and Juliet was written in poetry, not prose, because it's a play. It's meant to be performed. It's not really meant to be read, even though we technically do read it. You're not really supposed to just sit there with the book and look at the words and read them silently. You're supposed to listen to it, watch it on a stage. That's what it was created for being performed. All right, next one is a metaphor. So a metaphor is a description of one thing in terms of another that's intended to show the similarities and the shared traits between those two things, right? It's a kind of comparison between two things. These two things are not always very similar, but they have certain shared traits or certain shared similarities that actually help the metaphor to work, to convey its intended meaning. So simple metaphors almost always use the verb to be. So is, was, are, being, been, be. But more complex metaphors may not use them, may not use those verbs. Metaphors are not similes. Similes use a word like, as, or resembles. But Metaphors don't have those words. So if you see a word like that, then you know it's a simile, even if it also makes a comparison between two seemingly unlike things, even if it does show the similarities or the shared traits between those things. If it actually uses the word like or as, then it's a simile. It's not a metaphor. Shakespeare does use some similes, but you're going to see many more metaphors in Romeo and Juliet. These mostly help to show what characters are like, show how certain characters feel or think about other characters or ideas. So for both similes and metaphors, you can just set up a little equation like this, blank equals blank, that shows a comparison between the things. So some examples here. Michael was a monster on the football field. The linemen could do nothing to keep him out of the pocket. Right. So we have Michael on one side. Michael equals monster. Right. There are some shared traits between Michael and a monster. Like being really tough and strong, and maybe even people being afraid of him. Right. There's a comparison there that you can use to set up that equation. The high school was a prison, complete with metal detectors, no windows, and a team of police officers. I've been to a school like that before. It's creepy. So you've got the high school on one side. High school equals prison. That's the comparison. That's the metaphor. Her heart was completely broken. Right. Her heart equals some kind of fragile object that can be shattered, like a plate or a figurine. My pulse is racing. This is something you'll hear often. Someone's heart's beating fast, right? So my pulse equals something that runs or moves very quickly, like an Olympic runner or something. Geez, that computer is such a dinosaur, right? Of course, intended to highlight that the computer is old or and out of date. Maybe also really big, because today's computers tend to be smaller than they were, 15, 20, 25 years ago. So again, computer equals dinosaur. What are you, chicken? It means afraid, right? Chicken is a word used to say, like, are you afraid of something? But it's, for the equation here, it is you equals chicken. Okay, example from Romeo and Juliet. This is a little harder. What ho, you men, you beasts, that quench the fire of your pernicious rage with purple fountains issuing from your veins. All right, so you have this comparison between the people who are fighting. This is actually in Act 1 of Romeo and Juliet. Act 1, Scene 1, there's a big old fight. Prince comes along and is so furious, like, what are you doing fighting in the streets? And he's talking to all the people who are fighting and compares them to beasts. Men equals beasts. And apparently there are purple fountains issuing from these beasts' veins. Next one here. Earth hath swallowed all my hopes but she. This is actually Capulet, Juliet's dad, saying, like, Juliet is his only daughter. All of his other children died before they, got old enough to become a teenager. This idea is like Earth equals a monster with a big maw that can swallow up children. Under love's heavy burden, I do sink. So we have, this idea that love equals some heavy burden, like a big, super heavy backpack that weighs you down, or like a weight or an anvil on your back that's causing you to sink. And in this case, it's Romeo being dramatic and feeling depressed because of his relationship with love. So I think you get the idea here. Look for the metaphors. There are hundreds of metaphors in Romeo and Juliet. Also, please note, this is important. When a metaphor has more than 10 lines, like more than 10 lines of the play, actually have a metaphor or all one metaphor that's like making multiple comparisons between the two same things, that is an extended metaphor. We call that extended metaphor. Okay, next one is a hyperbole. You may have learned this before. Um, Hyperbole is just an extreme exaggeration. So Joey's car zipped down the track at the speed of sound. Somehow I don't think his car went that fast. That's way above the speed limit. I'm so thirsty I could drink all of Lake Michigan. Probably not. That's a lot of water. It's an exaggeration. Feels like a freezer in here, right? So it's very cold. That's the idea. This assignment is impossible. Probably not impossible. I think you get the idea. Writers use hyperbole to help us understand characters, especially those who like to be dramatic. Romeo. All right, a motif. A motif, we mentioned this a little bit with Of Mice and Men, is an image or idea that appears frequently in a work of literature. It just keeps showing up over and over again in the story or the novel or the play. Motifs can help us to understand how characters change. They can also help suggest thematic messages. If we keep seeing, a same reference to stars and the fact that people often believe the stars could tell the future or would spell out a person's fate or destiny, right? If we keep seeing those references, it might say something about what the author is trying to say about fate or destiny. Some examples from Of Mice and Men to help you understand what a motif is. We had a lot of animals and references to animals throughout Of Mice and Men, which helped us in a lot of ways to understand Lenny, who he was, what his personality was like, what his flaws were as a human being. Dreams, and dreams especially of the future, were a motif. The American dream was a motif in Of Mice and Men. This idea that like the weak beat out the strong, the masculine beat out the feminine, the abled are beat out the disabled. This idea of domination was also a motif frequently seen in Of Mice and Men. A symbol can be an instance of a motif, right? So Lenny's dead mouse in chapter 1, the dead puppy in chapter 5, Candy's dog in chapter 3. All of these were symbols, and all of those contributed to the motif of animals and references to animals throughout the novel. So thematic ideas can also be motifs. So the idea that strong is greater than weak. That's a thematic idea, and that was but that showed up so many times in the novel that it's definitely a motif. So in class soon, we'll talk more about the motifs you need to be looking for in Romeo and Juliet. You can expect that once we talk about them, and then we're reading the novella, I could ask you a question about motifs, like, what is the motif that's being referenced in this little passage of the text, for example. So you need to know what a motif is. Right. Comic relief is our next one. Comic relief is, in a play, when something light and funny happens right after a more dark or serious scene. Comic relief lightens the mood, entertains the audience, makes the audience laugh, and creates important gaps between more serious scenes. If every scene in a play were dark and sad and just sort of hard to or were just really heavy, then the play wouldn't really be that entertaining. Shakespeare is supposed to be funny. There's a lot of parts of Romeo and Juliet that are supposed to be funny, hilarious even. And if you get what he's saying and you get that it's comic relief, then you will laugh. So there are two major kinds of comic relief you need to look for in Romeo and Juliet. Puns. A pun is a play on the multiple meanings or spellings of a word or on words that sound really similarly. They mostly just exist to make people laugh. A lot of jokes are based on puns, especially like what people like to call dad jokes. They're based on puns. So a chicken's favorite car is a coupe. I've been to the dentist many times, so I know the drill. In the first case, coop is like COOP is like where chickens live when you have them in your yard. A drill is like both an instrument the dentist uses, but knowing the drill means like you know what the process is, you know what to expect. So there's two different meanings of these words, or two similar sounds and spellings that can create the funny joke. Even after Sarah's mother returned the piece to the store, she still suffered from post-traumatic stress syndrome, right? So this is funny because post-traumatic stress syndrome is like an actual thing, but it looks like someone, Sarah's mom uh, bought her a dress and she hated it. It was really ugly, and so it was triggering, and so it had to be returned. Right? Post-traumatic stress syndrome. Ha. No one Santa could ever deliver presents to the whole world. There must be many independent clauses around. The second kind of comic relief you need to know is an innuendo. It is a statement that's funny because it makes a sexual reference. These can also be puns. They're often puns. They're everywhere in Shakespeare. Remember that if you've watched the other videos before this one, you've probably already seen. It's typically the poorer people, working people, the masses who would be attending plays. Not the like stuffy square, uh, um, like royalty or nobles on a day-to-day basis. They did attend sometimes, but it's more often the sort of lower classes in England watching Shakespeare's plays. And the lower classes didn't have any issues with, sexual humor. There's a lot of sexual humor in Shakespeare. And if you don't get it, that's fine. It doesn't matter that much. But if you do get it, it's funny. And I want you to be able to enjoy Romeo and Juliet. It's a great play. It's so hilarious if you understand what's going on. So here's an example. You get it or you don't. Said to Juliet, "Thou wilt fall backward when thou hast more wit." What does it think about what it could mean to fall backward in a certain situation? Samson in the first act says, "My naked weapon is out. I will back thee." He's talking about a sword. You get it or you don't. The Juliet, nor any other part belonging to a man. She says this when she's talking about, Romeo and how his name Montague doesn't really mean anything. And she's talking about the name doesn't really actually refer to any physical part of a man, any part at all. You get it or you don't. Moving on. So an oxymoron. An oxymoron is the combination of two seemingly contradictory terms used in conjunction with each other in a way that makes sense or expresses truth. So let me say that more simply. Two words, or sometimes a few more than two words, put next to each other that, on the surface, the two or more words that are next to each other look like they're opposite words, but when you put them together, it still expresses an idea that we understand, that makes sense. So they're everywhere, especially when showing that one character in particular, Romeo, is feeling conflicted about something. So some examples of oxymorons: jumbo shrimp, open secret, deafening silence, hell's angels, rolling stop, pretty ugly, educated guess, butthead, alone together, original copy. So if you think about some of these, a jumbo shrimp is like, the word shrimp often is used to refer to something or someone that's small because, a lot of shrimps are small, but a jumbo shrimp is a big shrimp. Jumbo shrimps do exist. You can buy them, but it's two words that seem opposite that still make sense. And then open secret, like everyone's pretending it's a secret, but really everyone knows. A deafening silence. It's quiet, and the fact that it's quiet is really noticeable and uncomfortable. What other one is here? If you roll, you don't really stop, but people often, when people don't quite stop all the way at a stop sign, we'll call it a rolling stop because they're supposed to stop and they kind of stop, but they don't really stop. Let's see here. Alone together. This is something that, two friends or siblings who are studying together. You can be in the same room, but you're doing your own thing. You've got your headphones in. You're paying attention to your own thing. Like you're not actually like working together. That would be like alone together or together alone. All right. The last one is iambic pentameter. So iambic pentameter is a little bit complicated, and I want to make it as simple and clear for you as possible. So we're going to look at something else here. This is a separate document. In order for you to understand iambic pentameter, you first need to get syllables. What on earth is a syllable? So it has a formal definition. It is one or more vowel sounds. So A, E, I, O, or U, all the sounds those letters can make, and also sometimes Y, plus 0 or more consonant sounds. A syllable is often thought of as one beat of rhythm in a language. So try to do this with me here. I wish we could do this in person. It's a lot of fun, but this will have to do. Here are some one-syllable words. I, he, you, it, be, are, cry, old, some names, cash, Claire, right? Just one syllable in each of those words. You've got only one vowel sound in those, even the one like Claire, where you have you have two letters in there. You've got a lot of letters in there, 6 letters, but it's only one sound. It's sort of an A sound, Claire, right? So it's one, because it's one vowel sound plus a bunch of consonants, it's one syllable only, even if it's meant a lot of letters, or more letters than you would think there should be for a one-syllable word. All right, some two-syllable words. Student, paper, happy, kitten, Sarah, Victor, golly, Xander, right? Two-syllable words. For the rest of these, you can see clearly: beginning, submission, assignment, Salome, Anushka. If you look for the vowel sounds, you can find them too, right? Sa, lo, me, 3 vowel sounds. Anushka, 3 vowel sounds. Some words with even more syllables. Responsibility, 6. Circumnavigation, 6. Disambiguation, 6. Alrighty, so not only does every word in English have one or more syllables, but also in every meaningful syllable or series of syllables in a human language, some syllables have more louder and have more emphasis than others. And these rhythms help us to create meaning, and they also help people to speak very quickly without losing meaning, without someone being confused by what you're saying. So if you listen to all these words I've listed here, you're going to hear naturally where the syllable stress is and where it isn't. And if I say them wrong, you will definitely hear it. So here are these correctly: paper, right? Bedroom, hotel, Snapchat, unfriending, insanity, right? So you can hear right, that's where the emphasis is in these words. If I try to say paper or bedroom or hotel. Well, that one's okay, kind of. Not really, though. If I say sniff chat and put the emphasis on the wrong place, it doesn't make sense anymore. It sounds really strange. This is because English mandates, English requires that you put the syllable in the right place on these words, or you put the stress in the right place, on the right syllable in these words. If you do it wrong, it just you sound like a maniac. There are a couple more examples there. Discontinuity, indefatigable, right? That one in particular is interesting because there's really only one, at least in the way I pronounce it, there's only one stressed syllable, despite there being a lot more total syllables. So it might be worth it for you to think about some words that you use on a daily basis, or just random words or vocab or your name, right? Think about where is the stress on the syllable? Which syllable is stressed? Which syllable is not stressed? So people generally represent stressed syllables with a stress mark written above a syllable. It looks like the little sort of like an apostrophe, but not exactly. It's a strike mark. And then people who care about syllables, they represent the unstressed syllables with an unstressed mark, and it looks like the little bowl shape. You can remember this because soup, especially pho in particular, soup or pho fits in a bowl, and if you're eating warm soup, it's going to make you relaxed and less stressed, right? So therefore, you can remember the unstressed syllable is the one that's represented with the little bowl shape. Again, syllable stress is always predetermined by the language. You can never change the stress of a word just by speaking differently. If you do, you'll sound like a maniac. Syllable stress is not ambiguous. It's not ambiguous. There is no flexibility. It's, one pronunciation is right and the other is wrong, period, end of story. So in English, there are also a lot of words where you can only tell the difference between the words based on which part of the word is stressed. And so if you stress the wrong part of the word, you're saying a different word. My favorite example is produce, where the syllables stress is on the second syllable. Produce, which is a verb meaning to create things, to manufacture them. And then there's the other one, produce, right, with the syllable in the first position of the two syllables. Produce is like fruits and vegetables. So those are two radically different words. They're different parts of speech, and putting the stress in the right place is the only way that you can tell the difference between them. So it's important for meaning in English. So here's the deal. You need to know syllable stress, because if you don't get it, you will not understand iambic pentameter, which is what I'm going to talk about on the next page here. So also you should know syllable stress is important in choir. It's important in more traditional kinds of music. It's important in all kinds of modern music. If you are familiar with hip hop or rap, the rhythms in these languages and the stress of different syllables is so important to conveying the ideas and the feelings that underlie that kind of music. It's possible that someone is writing this music without actually knowing what all these things are called. But if you were to actually go back and look at your favorite hip hop or rap song, or even modern pop song, you would likely notice some patterns in the syllable stress of words and stanzas in those in that music. Different languages have different syllable stress rules. I know that one of the most challenging things for people who are native speakers of Spanish, but who never learned in an academic place like at school to write in Spanish, people are always like, where do I put the darn accent, right? The little mark on the Spanish words. and you put it where the syllable stress is, right? If you I have the favorite example for this, and it's the Spanish word dólares, right? If you say dólares, you're putting the emphasis on the right spot in the word. That is, the accent goes on the first, the O, right, in the first part of the word. It always goes on a vowel. But if you were to put it in the wrong place and say something like dólares, I sound like a maniac in Spanish. All right. So what is iambic pentameter? It is so essential to understanding what's going on, like why Shakespeare writes things the way he does. So few more little pieces of vocabulary before we get into exactly what it is. You need to know these things. Meter is just a fancy word for a regular pattern of stressed and unstressed syllables in a poem or in a line of Romeo and Juliet. A foot is a word that we use to refer to a tiny piece of the meter. So 2 or 3 syllables, only one of which can be stressed, and there are a lot of different kinds of them. It just depends on the order of the stress. And then we have iambs. An iamb is a specific kind of metrical foot that has exactly 2 syllables. The first syllable is unstressed, and the second one is stressed. So unstressed first, and then stressed after. And this is pretty natural for English. And also it sort of represents our heartbeat a little bit. It's badum. That is an iamb. Badum. So unstressed, then stressed. If you didn't get all of that, that's okay. This is your first introduction. But the one thing you must understand is that an iamb is badum. So look here. You have iambic pentameter. That is a very specific kind of meter that Shakespeare loves and uses in almost every line in the entire play of Romeo and Juliet. If you have 5 iambs, it's written right there in the word if you pay attention to it. Like a pentagon has 5 sides. Well, pentameter means you've got 5 pieces of meter, and the pieces of meter are the iambs. So we call it iambic pentameter. So a single line of iambic pentameter will have this rhythm. Ba-dum, 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 ba-dum. I've given you so many examples here. Before we get into those, though, I want you to just try to maybe pause the video for a minute and clap along with these, so you can feel the rhythm. Ba-dum, 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 ba-dum. Alrighty, so some examples here. You can practice with these. I am, I am, I am, I am, I am. I am a pirate with a wooden leg. I'm hungry, is it almost time for lunch? Not yet, the soup is ting on the stove. Messed that one up a little bit. Oops. All right, so those are just some random examples. All 3 of these are from a little teeny part of Romeo and Juliet. Remember, the whole play is written in iambic pentameter, except the lower class characters. Sometimes they don't, when they're talking to each other, they don't use iambic pentameter. They use just regular prose. But almost all of the play is written like this. So, oh, she doth teach the torches to burn bright. It seems she hangs upon the cheek of night, like a rich jewel in an Ethiop's ear. Right? You can feel the rhythm there, and you can clap along with it. I encourage you to do that several times with all of these examples until you've really internalized, like 10 syllables, unstressed followed by stressed 5 times. The whole play is written like this. I will, for all of you who have stayed with me watching this whole long video, you're going to be let in on a little secret right now. part of your final exam in English 9A second semester is going to be, assuming you're watching this in spring 2021, your part of your final is going to be choosing a little passage and doing a dramatic reading of the passage. And an important part of that is that you recognize the meter and that you can, you can be aware of it and you can use it to enhance your presentation. So remember this, pay attention for all the parts of the play that are written in iambic pentameter. All right, that is actually all I have for you in this video lesson.